In today's video, we're taking a look at some trade rumors involving the New York Rangers. Will the call-up of young goaltender Igor Shestyorkin lead to a trade involving one of their more experienced goaltenders? We're also looking at some other deals involving the New York Rangers, Toronto Maple Leafs, Chicago Blackhawks, as well as the Montreal Canadiens. We'll get into all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to kick things off here talking about some trade rumors involving the New York Rangers. There's been some interesting moves being made within their organization and has certainly led to a lot of speculation. And let's kick things off talking about the new potential goaltending controversy, or at least the potential to be one, with the Blue Shirts here. Now, of course, they've called up young goaltender Igor Shestyorkin, who is playing very well for their American Hockey League affiliate in Hartford, but yet many people are questioning the reasoning behind this. Their other goaltenders, Lundqvist and Georgiev, are not hurt. They're both healthy, able to play, so there's certainly some question marks surrounding this recall. Immediately, many people question whether or not Georgiev might find himself on a move. There's already been some rumors earlier in the season he could find himself traded before the NHL deadline. He's certainly an interesting goaltender to keep an eye on as teams that might look to upgrade their backup goaltending situation as we inch closer to the NHL trade deadline. He's certainly had his times this year where he had his ups and downs, but really overall, I do think he's a pretty solid goaltender and could certainly provide some much needed depth in opposition to at least a handful of other clubs around the league. I don't really see Henrik Lundqvist going anywheres. He has a full no-move clause, which he'd have to waive and agree to be traded, and he's made it pretty clear he wants to remain with the Rangers throughout this rebuild and remain a Ranger for the remainder of his NHL career. So I really would think that Georgiev would be the one to move should they decide to make a trade. Now, of course, the other part about this as well is they can't just send Georgiev down to the minors any longer. He is no longer waivers exempt. He's passed that back a couple weeks ago after he has 60 NHL games under his belt, so he would have to go through waivers, and you can pretty well guarantee he'd be claimed if he hit the waiver wire. So I really don't see the Rangers going down that road either. Now, the Rangers have made some statements here, and they've made it pretty clear that this is really not about the other two goaltenders at all, that it's really about Shestyorkin earning an opportunity here, as he's played extremely well down in Hartford. Now, he's been drafted within part of the Rangers organization for a long period of time. He was drafted way back in 2014, but only signed his contract here recently. He played several years over in Russia, putting up some really solid numbers, has been looked upon as being the heir apparent to Lundqvist for several years now, but Jolan just made his move over to North America at the start of the current NHL season. So he only has about a half a season in the American Hockey League, but that half a season has gone very well, and I do think it's probably fair to say that he has earned himself an opportunity. Well, there really is a strong possibility here. I do think the Rangers will consider moving a goaltender, but I think this could be a little bit of a tryout for Shestyorkin to just make sure that he's able to handle the NHL game before they make that move. Now, another possibility playing a role here, as well as we've seen with other Russian players and other prospects of European descent that have come over to the NHL, many of them have built into their contract a European assignment clause if they're not able to play in the NHL. It kind of gets them out of playing in the minors and allows them to go back, play in Europe or the KHL to earn more money instead of playing in the minor leagues in North America. It's not 100% certain if Shestyorkin has one of those clauses in his contract, but it very well could be the case. Very well might be influencing the decision here by the Rangers to call him up. There's been talks that the management team of the Rangers have been holding several talks with Shestyorkin's agent over the last 3 or 4 weeks, and a lot of that has to do with getting him an opportunity at the NHL. I think maybe they might have felt pressured to make this move and to make sure that he doesn't head back to go back and play in Russia. And if he goes back there, maybe he won't come back. It's really hard to say. But if they have a European assignment clause in that contract and he's threatening to invoke it, that very well could have played a big role in what is going on here. As we've seen, the Rangers have had issues with other prospects. We've seen Vitaly Krasov invoke his contract clause, which allowed him to go back over to Russia. Of course, he has since come back. Things did not work out over there. They've also got the situation with Elias Anderson, who has left the team, demanded a trade. So I think that they're kind of probably doing some damage control here. They really can't afford to have any more prospects be having these types of situations. And I'm not really sure that it's fair to say that we're really close to having one of those with Igor Shestyorkin, but it's certainly something they want to heavily avoid. He's a tremendous tremendous goalie prospect, and like I said, he's been viewed upon as being their heir apparent to Lundqvist for several years. They finally get him over to North America. They really don't want to mess that up and make sure they give him the right opportunity to make sure he sticks around. So let me know what you think down below in the comments. Does his call-up mean we're likely going to be to see a trade in the goaltending situation with the New York Rangers? Or do you think it is possible the Rangers just felt pressure to give him an opportunity and that the other goalies will have to sit out more games just to kind of make sure they make him happy so that he doesn't bolt for Europe? Now, staying with the Rangers momentarily, of course, a player we've talked about off and on here in a rumor mill heading into the NHL trade deadline is Chris Kreider. Now, as we've mentioned on numerous occasions, it's not 100% clear if the Rangers intend to trade him or not. But if you follow the pattern of the Rangers over the last few years as they've gone through this rebuild, they don't tend to keep unrestricted free agents that are getting into their latter part of their career. And it only makes sense that Kreider would be the next one on that list to move along to a new team. And there's been all kinds of interest from around NHL, according to several NHL insiders. But Larry Brooks of the New York Post is reporting today that he believes that Chris Kreider has all the Canadian teams on his no trade list. He does have a modified no trade clause, which gives him the ability to block trades to a certain number of teams. As we reported before, there was at least a couple of those Canadian teams, like the Flames as well as the Habs, who were apparently showing interest in Kreider. But if this is the case, a deal to get worked out to make the acquisition of him onto their teams likely won't come to be. Now, Brooks also goes on to mention here that this is the reason why the Canadiens decided to sign Ilya Kovalchuk instead. Once they kind of come to the decision that Kreider would not even entertain coming to Montreal, that they decided to go in another direction. Now, it's also mentioned here as well by Elliot Friedman on Saturday Headlines on the weekend that the Montreal Canadiens did seriously consider talking to the Vancouver Canucks about acquiring Sven Baertschi. And of course, Baertschi's been a player who really hasn't found himself in a regular lineup spot in the Canucks organization and has been looking for a new opportunity, playing mostly lately in the American Hockey League. He said talks never really progressed with the Canadiens and the Canucks, but the Canadiens internally at least were kind of watching him, observing, and seriously considered making an offer to the Canucks to make the acquisition. But of course, that deal didn't take place either. They went the route of signing Kovalchuk. As we also know, there's been a lot of talk about the Chicago Blackhawks, especially since they announced that Calvin DeHaan and Brent Seabrook would be out for the season, whether or not they would be making some acquisitions to bolster their depth on the blue line to either make an acquisition to try to make a playoff run, or even possibly could they entertain the thought of maybe taking on a bad contract which they can use the cap space for in return to get additional assets along with it. There's been some question marks in that regard, which I really don't see the Blackhawks doing. There has been lots of talk that they've had several conversations around the NHL about acquiring a veteran blue liner to give their blue line some much needed help back there, but many of the teams that are looking to sell blue liners are looking for the Blackhawks to move one of their top prospects, which they've been unwilling to do to this point, and I really would like to see Stan Bowman stick to his guns in that regard. I can see how he would need some help on the blue line, but personally I'd be giving the opportunity to some of the younger defensemen and giving them an opportunity to develop, and if they feel that they're really not ready for that opportunity, then maybe look to the waiver wire or something less expensive. I wouldn't be giving up much in the way of assets for that. I really don't see the Blackhawks being a playoff team this year. I think they're too far out of the mix right now. Even though to a degree the Western Conference is somewhat more open than the East, I just don't see it being worth it for the Blackhawks to give up a potential really solid prospect in exchange for some blue line help that very well might not take them too far. At the same time, it can only be a rental player really anyway, because the Hawks only have that cap space on a short-term basis due to long-term injury reserve relief that they can obtain because of the contracts of Seabrook and DeHaan being on LTIR. And really, if they play next year, they're going to need that space. They really can't commit to another contract on a long-term basis. But if there was a team that needed to shed a bad contract, only had 1 year left on it, and they could pick up an extra asset or two in regards for taking that, then certainly that's something that Stan Bowman could entertain. Otherwise, I would kind of let the kids develop here as best they can and not really take on anything too much and waste a prospect or draft pick going out the door. John Shannon, former Sportsnet insiders, reporting that the Carolina Hurricanes have made their final offer to Williams for a contract for the remainder of the season, and we'll see if Williams decides to accept the offer or not. There wasn't really any further details as to what the offer was, just that it was for the remainder of the season, and apparently negotiations have been ongoing, and then they've made what they're calling their final offer. So we'll see if he makes the announcement to return. Elliot Friedman had previously reported he felt there was a possibility we could have have found out his future plans on the past weekend here, but of course that never came to be. So hopefully here in the next few days, Justin Williams makes a decision. I certainly would love to see him return to Carolina. I think that's the perfect place for him. They could use his leadership there as they get ready to head into another playoff race and see what they can accomplish this year. So we'll hopefully find out soon enough what the future holds for Justin Williams. Now, there's also been some talk recently about the Toronto Maple Leafs maybe making some upgrades before the deadline heading into the playoffs. Obviously, they've gotten things turned around. They have a great record under Sheldon Keefe, and they're heading into another likely playoff run here. But as we know, the Maple Leafs are built to score. They have lots of skill. But their downfalls are defensively as well as the backup goaltending situation, which they've been trying to iron out and trying to build up the confidence here of Michael Hutchison. They gave him his first start that was not on a back-to-back situation. We also saw him come in on relief for Freddie Anderson against the Edmonton Oilers. So he's getting a little bit more action. So they want to kind of build him up, see what they have, and see if he can actually really take the reins there and be the backup goaltender. So I do expect him to play a little bit more than usual over the next few weeks, especially where they have gotten a lot of wins under their belt. Their playoff spot's a little bit more secure right now, so they can take the risk of having him in the net and giving Anderson more rest as they approach the playoffs here. So I guess we will see if Hutch is the backup goalie or not for Anderson come playoff time, but it's certainly something they're going to explore a little bit longer now as we get closer to the deadline. If things really aren't working out, I do think it's possible that they could make a move in that regard, and I would not be surprised to maybe see them add either some defensive depth or possibly some toughness or grit as well. We've seen him call up Mason Marchment here recently, who's played his first NHL games, got his first NHL point, and he's certainly the type of player who can play that physical game, provide that grit. So obviously it goes to show that they are likely noticing that they need some of that in their lineup. They're probably giving him a bit of an audition to see if he can be that guy before they make any other additional acquisitions. But the other thing with the Maple Leafs as well is there's some people questioning whether or not the emergence of Pierre Engvall, he's played so well and produced at such a good rate. Could that give the Maple Leafs the flexibility to trade another forward like an Andreas Janssen or even a Kasperi Kapanen, who could also help them free up some cap space and give them a little bit more cap certainty moving forward? If they sign Engvall to a contract extension for a lower amount for 2, 3, 4 years, let's say, where he has a little bit less established, they very well could buy them some time here and move out of contract, get some cap space, get some other assets in return. They very well could use one of those guys to either upgrade the goalie situation if they feel they need to, or maybe add to the blue line or another part of the team heading into the playoffs. So wouldn't completely rule out the possibility. And if they don't go down that road now, I do think it's a possibility they could revisit that come the offseason. But at the same time, I know that Kyle Dubas is pretty sold here on having a very, very skilled team, and he's convinced that that seems to be the way to go to get all the way. So I guess we will find out what Dubas decides to do and what moves they decide to make. But I really don't think we're going to see anything too quickly here out of the Leafs. Sheldon Keefe's got this team winning. Although many of the Leaf games are still really high-scoring games, which is really not what you're going to see in the playoffs, they do need to make some adjustments, and I'm sure they realize that. It's just a matter of time and figuring it all out. Does the emergence of Pierre Engvall give them the flexibility of moving a guy like a Kapanen or a Janssen to upgrade other areas of the team? Do you see it happening by the trade deadline, or would it be more likely to happen perhaps in the offseason? Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments, and we'll continue the conversation. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.